Owen Mercer found the note at dawn. He had woken to silence, the same silence that had filled their house for 18 months, thick as dust on forgotten furniture. But this silence felt different, sharper. He threw off the quilt Sarah had made 3 winters ago and walked barefoot to his son's room. The bed was empty. The window stood open, letting November air pour through like an accusation. Owen's heart seized. He crossed the room in 3 strides, and that's when he saw a piece of paper on the pillow, edges curled from the cold. He picked it up with hands that had already started to tremble. I hate you. Dad, I hate life without Mama. Don't come looking for me. Owen read the words twice, 3 times. They didn't change. Each reading drove them deeper, past his ribs, into the place where he kept everything he couldn't face. Caleb, his boy, 12 years old and somewhere in the freezing dark. He searched the house first, calling his son's name into rooms that swallowed the sound. The kitchen where Sarah used to sing off-key while burning breakfast. The parlor where her chair still sat empty by the window. The barn where their old mare nickered at him. Confused by his panic? Nothing. No footprints in the frost. No sign of which direction Caleb had gone. Owen pulled on his coat and boots, his mind racing through possibilities. The creek, the abandoned mill, the ridge where he stopped. Couldn't let himself think about the ridge. Not yet. 18 months. That's how long it had been since Sarah died from the fever that swept through Cedar Hollow. 18 months of Owen working himself to exhaustion at his carpentry. Coming home to cook meals neither of them tasted. Sitting across from his son at a table set for 2 with 1 chair forever empty. He thought silence was protection. He thought if he just kept moving, kept building, kept not talking about her, the grief would eventually release its grip on both of them. He'd been wrong. The note proved that. His son had been drowning right beside him, and Owen hadn't even noticed. He stepped into the pre-dawn darkness, breath fogging in the cold. The town lay quiet below, just a scatter of lamplight in windows. Owen realized with a sinking feeling that he hadn't spoken to his neighbors in months, had pushed away every offered casserole, every invitation to Sunday dinner. He had no idea where to begin looking. His boy was somewhere in the November night. And Owen, the man who was supposed to protect him, didn't know his son at all anymore. Pride kept Owen searching alone for nearly an hour. He checked the creek first, calling Caleb's name until his voice went hoarse. Then the old mill, where boys sometimes went to throw stones at rusted machinery. Nothing. The cold bit through his coat, and fear bit deeper. Finally, as the first gray light touched the mountains, he swallowed what remained of his pride and headed for the schoolhouse. Rebecca Thornton was already there, lamp burning in the window as she prepared lessons she wouldn't teach until after the holiday. Owen had seen her around town young, maybe 28, with kind eyes and a patience that had earned her respect even from the most difficult children. She'd been Caleb's teacher for 2 years now. Though Owen had never exchanged more than a few words with her, he pushed open the door without knocking. She looked up from her desk, and something in his face must have told her everything, because she rose immediately. Concern replacing surprise. Mr. Mercer, what's happened? Caleb. The name came out ragged. He's gone. Ran away sometime in the night. I've been searching. He stopped, unable to continue. Rebecca didn't waste time with questions. She crossed to the corner where a bell rope hung and pulled it 3 times. The sound rang out across the valley, sharp and urgent, the signal Cedar Hollow used for emergencies. How long? She asked, already reaching for her coat. Hours. Maybe since midnight. He left a note. What did it say? Owen couldn't repeat the words. He handed her the crumpled paper instead. Rebecca read it, and something shifted in her expression. Not pity, something deeper. Understanding. Maybe. She handed it back gently. I've seen his drawings, she said quietly. In class. Houses with no people in them. A woman's face. Over and over. Owen felt the words like a blow. His son had been crying out for months, and Owen had been too wrapped in his own silence to hear. Within 20 minutes, lanterns began appearing across the valley. Neighbors Owen had avoided, shopkeepers he'd barely greeted. The pastor and his wife, all of them gathering with coats and determination. He watched them come together and felt ashamed that it took losing his son to remember his town existed. Rebecca organized them efficiently, dividing the valley into sections. But when the groups dispersed, she stayed beside Owen. "Children go where their hearts ache most," she said softly. "When did you last visit her grave?" Owen couldn't answer. He knew he didn't need to. Sarah's grave sat 3 miles up the ridge, overlooking the valley she'd loved. Owen hadn't been there since the burial, couldn't bear it. But Caleb. He started running before the thought finished forming. The ridge trail was treacherous in the half-light, frost making every stone slick. Owen climbed anyway, lungs burning, Rebecca close behind with a lantern that threw wild shadows on the pines. He heard his son before he saw him. The sound was small, a whimper, barely human, carried on the wind. Owen's heart cracked open at the edges. They found Caleb curled against Sarah's headstone, arms wrapped around the cold granite as if trying to embrace it. His lips were blue. His whole body shook with tremors that went beyond cold. Tears had frozen in tracks down his cheeks. Caleb. Owen's voice broke on the name. Rebecca reached the boy first. She stripped off her coat without hesitation and wrapped it around his thin shoulders, pulling him against her warmth. Caleb collapsed into her arms, and the whimper became a sob raw, desperate, the sound of grief that had found no other outlet. "Mama," the boy wept. "I just wanted to be close to Mama." Owen stood frozen, not from the cold, from something deeper. He watched this woman he barely knew hold his son with more tenderness than he'd shown in months. She rocked Caleb gently, murmuring words Owen couldn't hear. And the boy clung to her like she was the only solid thing in a world that had gone liquid with loss. This was his failure made visible. His son had come here alone in the dark, in the killing cold, because he had nowhere else to go with his grief. Because Owen had made their home a place where sorrow had no voice. He knelt in the frost beside them, and something inside him finally collapsed. "I don't know how to do this." The words came out broken, barely a whisper. "I don't know how to be his father. I don't know how to be enough without her." Rebecca looked up at him, still holding his trembling son. The first real light of morning touched her face, and her eyes held no judgment, only a compassion so steady it felt like something he could lean against. "You don't have to do it alone," she said simply. 3 words. Owen felt them land somewhere deep, in the hollow place he'd been protecting with silence and work and distance. They didn't fix anything, but they opened a door he'd kept locked since Sarah died. Together, they lifted Caleb and began the long walk home. The boy weighed almost nothing in Owen's arms. When had he gotten so thin? The empty chair at their table accused him with every step. Behind them, the sun rose over the ridge where Sarah lay. Ahead, their cabin waited. Owen didn't know what came next, only that something had to change. Something already had. Rebecca came every day after that. At first, she claimed it was to check on Caleb's recovery. The boy had caught a chill from his night on the ridge, not dangerous, but enough to keep him in bed with a mild fever. She brought soup from the boarding house where she lived. She brought books from the schoolhouse. She brought a quiet presence that seemed to ease the air in rooms where grief had settled like dust. Owen watched her from doorways, uncertain how to participate in his own home. "Your father built this table." Rebecca ran her hand along the oak surface, admiring the joinery. "The craftsmanship is beautiful. My grandfather started it. Pa finished it. I've just maintained it." Owen leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Sarah used to say it would outlast all of us. It was the first time he'd spoken his wife's name aloud in months. The word felt strange in his mouth, sacred. Almost. Rebecca didn't flinch or offer empty condolences. She simply nodded. She was right. Good wood, well joined. It'll hold for generations. Caleb improved slowly. The fever broke on the third day, but he remained quiet, watchful. With Owen, he was still distant, polite answers, averted eyes. But with Rebecca, something different emerged. Owen discovered it by accident. He'd come in from the barn early one afternoon and heard voices from Caleb's room. He paused outside the door, not wanting to interrupt. "These are beautiful." Rebecca's voice, warm with genuine admiration. "You drew all of these yourself." "I started after Mama died." Caleb's voice was small but steady. "I was afraid I'd forget what she looked like, so I drew her, over and over." Paper rustled. Owen pressed his back against the wall, heart tight. "This one," Rebecca said softly. "The three of you together, with smoke coming from the chimney. That's how I remember home. Before." A long pause. Then Rebecca, "I lost my mother when I was 12, just like you." Owen heard his son's sharp intake of breath. "You did scarlet fever. I was holding her hand when she went, for a long time after. I couldn't remember anything except that last moment. Her face when she was sick, not when she was well." Another pause. "Drawing her might have helped. You're smarter than I was." "Does it ever stop hurting?" "No." Rebecca's voice was honest, gentle. "But it changes. The hurt becomes something you carry instead of something that carries you. Eventually, there's room for other things alongside it." Owen slipped away before they could discover him listening. He went to the barn and stood among sawdust in silence, thinking about a woman he barely knew who understood his son better than he did. That evening, Caleb came to dinner without being called. He didn't speak much, but he ate everything on his plate. And when Rebecca rose to leave, he hugged her quickly, almost shyly, before retreating to his room. Owen walked her to the door. "Thank you," he said. The words felt inadequate. "For everything you're doing. For him?" Rebecca paused on the porch, pulling her coat tighter against the cold. "He's a good boy, Mr. Mercer. He just needs to know it's safe to feel what he feels." "Owen," he said quietly. "Call me Owen." She smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her. "Good night, Owen. I'll come tomorrow if that's all right." He watched her walk down the road until the darkness swallowed her completely. Behind him, the fire crackled. The empty chair sat in its usual place, but somehow the room felt less cold. The confrontation came on a Tuesday. Rebecca arrived with fresh bread, and a determination Owen recognized he'd seen it in Sarah when she'd decided something needed saying. "Caleb's at the schoolhouse," she said, settling into a kitchen chair. "Mrs. Patterson is watching the children who came for reading practice. I wanted to speak with you alone." Owen poured coffee for them both, wary. "About what?" "About why your son ran to his mother's grave instead of to you." The words landed hard. Owen set down the coffee pot with more force than necessary. "You think I don't ask myself that every hour? I think you know the answer, and you're afraid of it." He turned to face her, jaw tight. "You've known us 3 weeks. You don't—" "He thinks you've forgotten her." Rebecca's voice stayed calm, but her eyes were fierce. "He told me. He said you never talk about her, never say her name, never visit her grave. He thinks your silence means you've moved on, and he can't understand how that's possible when he's still drowning." Owen gripped the edge of the counter. "I haven't forgotten anything. I think about her every minute of every day. I see her in every corner of this house, in every meal I burn, in every moment I don't know what to say to my own son." "Then tell him that." "I can't." The admission came out ragged. "I was raised to carry weight quietly. My father never spoke of loss. Neither did his father. You bear it. You don't burden others with it." Rebecca stood and crossed to where he stood, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. "Strength isn't silence, Owen. Strength is showing your boy that grief is survivable, that you can break and still rebuild, that loving someone who's gone doesn't mean you have nothing left to give. What if he sees me break and it scares him? He's already scared. He's scared because he's breaking alone, and he thinks his father doesn't understand. She touched his arm briefly, gently. Show him he's not alone. It's the only thing that will save both of you. That evening, Owen sat beside Caleb's bed instead of across the room. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Owen said, "Your mother made terrible biscuits." Caleb looked up, startled. "What? Terrible?" Hard as stones. She'd get so frustrated, start over 3 times, and they'd still come out like something you could build a foundation with. A ghost of a smile crossed Caleb's face. "She threw one at you once. Hit me right between the eyes. Said if I was going to complain, I could cook my own biscuits." Owen's voice caught. "I never did learn how. Still can't make them right." "Me neither." Caleb's eyes were bright now, tears threatening. "I miss her so much, Pa." "I know, son." Owen pulled the boy into his arms, held him tight, and finally let himself cry too. "So do I. Every single day." They stayed like that for a long time, grief flowing between them like a river finding its proper channel at last. The whispers started the week after Thanksgiving should have been. Owen first noticed them in the general store, picking up flour and salt. Mrs. Harmon stood with 2 other women near the fabric bolts, their voices dropping when he entered. He caught fragments anyway, schoolteacher sort, every day. Unseemly. He ignored them. Bought his supplies. Left without meeting anyone's eyes, but the whispers followed him home. People are talking. Rebecca stood at his fence the next afternoon, not coming to the gate. Her usually warm expression had gone careful, guarded. About me visiting here, about what it looks like. Owen's chest tightened. "What does it look like?" "You know what it looks like. A young unmarried woman, a widower. His son." She shook her head. "I should have been more careful. I never meant to cause trouble for you, for Caleb. You haven't caused trouble. You've helped us more than I can." Mrs. Patterson called me aside yesterday. Said there'd been complaints. Parents asking if the school teacher should be spending so much time at a man's house. Rebecca's voice was steady, but Owen saw the hurt beneath. "I've worked 2 years to earn this town's trust. I can't lose my position. So what are you saying?" She met his eyes, and he saw the answer before she spoke it. "I think I should stop coming for a while. Give the talk time to die down." For propriety's sake, the phrase hung unspoken between them. Owen wanted to argue, to tell her the town could think what it wanted. But old fears rose up, fear of judgment, of exposure, of being talked about the way they'd talked about Sarah's illness, his grief, his son's strange silences. "Maybe you're right," he heard himself say. Rebecca flinched just slightly, quickly controlled. She nodded once. "Tell Caleb I'll see him at school." She walked away down the road, and Owen watched her go. He told himself it was the right thing, the safe thing. The walls rising around his heart felt familiar, almost comfortable. That night, Caleb didn't come to dinner. Owen found him in his room, drawings spread across the bed. But these were different from the ones Rebecca had admired, darker, emptier. Houses with no smoke from their chimneys. A woman's face fading into fog. "Is Miss Rebecca coming tomorrow?" Caleb asked without looking up. "Not tomorrow. She's busy with school things." "She's not coming back. Is she?" Owen didn't answer. Couldn't. Caleb gathered his drawings and slid them into a box under his bed. He didn't cry, didn't argue. Just turned to face the wall. "It's fine, Pa. I understand. People always leave." Owen stood in the doorway, watching his son retreat into the same silence they'd worked so hard to break. He'd chosen safety over love, judgment over joy, and it felt like dying all over again. The night before, what should have been Thanksgiving sat like a stone in Owen's chest. He'd moved through the day mechanically, chores done without thought, meals prepared without appetite. Caleb had returned to his locked door and monosyllabic answers. The house felt colder than the November wind outside. After Caleb retreated to his room, Owen sat on the porch until the stars came out. Then, without fully deciding to, he pulled on his coat and began walking. The trail to the ridge was familiar now. His feet found the path in darkness, carrying him upward through pines that whispered with wind. The cold burned his lungs, but he welcomed the sharpness. It felt more honest than the numbness that had settled over him. Sarah's grave waited in moonlight, frost glittering on the granite. Owen knelt before it, and for the first time since her burial, he spoke to his wife. "I've made a mess of everything." His voice sounded strange in the silence. He pressed on anyway. "Caleb ran away because he thought I'd forgotten you. I hadn't. I could never. But I made him think that. I closed up so tight he couldn't find a way in." Owen's throat ached. "Then this woman came. Rebecca. She taught me how to talk to him again. How to say your name without choking on it. She brought laughter back into our house. Sarah. I didn't know how much I'd missed that sound until I heard it." The wind stirred the pines. Owen wiped his eyes with cold, roughened hands. "And then I let her go. Because people were talking. Because I was scared of loving someone again. Scared of what it might cost." He laughed bitterly. "You'd be ashamed of me. You were never scared of anything." He sat back on his heels, staring at the headstone, Sarah's name carved deep. The dates that marked her too short life. "I've been so busy trying not to feel that I forgot how to live. I've been so scared of losing again that I've lost everything that matters anyway." He closed his eyes, and in the silence, he heard her voice. Not a ghost, just memory. Clear as morning. "Don't let our boy grow up in silence, and don't you dare close your heart." Her last words, whispered from the bed where she'd spent her final days. Caleb asleep in the chair beside her. Owen had nodded, had promised, and then had spent 18 months breaking that promise in every way possible. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the stone, to the memory, to himself. "I'm so sorry." He stayed until the cold became unbearable. Then he rose, brushed the frost from his knees, and looked out over the valley where lights were going dark one by one. Tomorrow, he would go to Rebecca. Tomorrow. He would fight for his family, not the one he'd lost, but the one he could still build. Some fences needed mending. Some needed tearing down entirely. Sarah had never been afraid of love. It was time her husband stopped being afraid too. Owen dressed carefully for the first time in months, clean shirt, good trousers. He even brushed the dust from his hat, though he wasn't sure why it mattered. His hands trembled slightly as he buttoned his collar, and he had to start over twice. Caleb watched from the kitchen doorway, confusion clear on his thin face. "Where are you going, Pa?" "To the schoolhouse." Owen met his son's eyes. "To ask Miss Rebecca to come to Thanksgiving dinner. But Thanksgiving was last week. I know. But I finally have something to be thankful for. And I'm not going to let it walk away because some folks in town have nothing better to do than talk." Caleb's expression shifted, hope rising through the wariness like light through clouds. "Really? Really?" Owen crossed to his son and knelt so they were eye to eye. "I've made mistakes. Caleb. A lot of them. I thought if I didn't talk about your mama, didn't let myself feel how much I missed her, that somehow the grief would go away. Instead, I just pushed you away along with it. Pa, you don't have to. I do." Owen put his hands on Caleb's shoulders. "I loved your mother more than my own life, and when she died, I thought that was it. Thought my heart was closed for good. But Miss Rebecca showed me that's not how it has to be. That there's room to grieve what we lost and still hope for what might come." Caleb's eyes glistened. Mama would have liked her. Yeah. Owen's voice roughened. I think she would have. He hugged his son properly, fully, and then headed out into the morning. The schoolhouse sat at the edge of town, white clapboard against gray sky. Through the window, Owen could see Rebecca at her desk, head bent over papers. No children today. School was closed for the holiday week that had already passed. He pushed open the door. She looked up, surprise flickering across her face before she composed it. Owen, is everything all right? Is Caleb? Caleb's fine. He removed his hat, held it in both hands. I came to talk to you. I don't think that's wise. I don't care what people will think. The words came out stronger than he'd intended. Rebecca went still, watching him with those gold-flecked eyes. You asked me once what your visits looked like. Owen continued. I was too scared to answer honestly. So I'll answer now. They looked like hope. They looked like my son learning to smile again. They looked like a house that had been frozen for 18 months finally starting to thaw. Owen, I know I'm not much of a catch, a widower with a grieving boy and a house full of memories. I can't promise I won't stumble. Can't promise the grief won't knock me down sometimes. He stepped closer. But I can promise you'll never face a storm alone. Not if you stay. Rebecca's hands gripped the edge of her desk. The town can think what it wants. I'm done living by their rules. I'm done being so afraid of losing that I push away everyone who matters. He took another step. My wife told me, before she died, not to close my heart. I've spent 18 months doing exactly that. I'm asking you to help me open it again. The schoolhouse door creaked behind him. Owen turned to find Pastor Williams standing in the entrance, clearly having heard at least part of the exchange. The older man's face was unreadable for a long moment. Then he smiled, slow, warm, approving. About time. Owen Mercer. He tipped his hat. I'd say the good Lord's been waiting for you to sort this out. I'll make sure Mrs. Harmon knows the whole town's been praying for exactly this kind of healing. He retreated, leaving the door ajar. Through the gap, Owen could see other townspeople pausing on the street, watching. Let them watch. Let them see. He turned back to Rebecca. Thanksgiving dinner? A week late? My cooking's terrible, but Caleb's getting better at biscuits. He held out his hand. Forever, if you'll have us, both of us. Rebecca's composure finally cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she rose from her desk and took his hand. What about propriety? She asked, but she was almost laughing. Owen pulled her closer. I think we've been proper long enough. Thanksgiving came a week late to the Mercer house. Owen surveyed the kitchen with something between pride and despair. The turkey was slightly overdone. The potatoes had lumps. The gravy had started as an ambitious attempt and ended as a hopeful prayer. You're sure this is edible? Caleb eyed the spread doubtfully. Mostly sure. Miss Rebecca's bringing biscuits. Thank goodness. The boy grinned. Actually grinned, and something in Owen's chest swelled to see it. They'd spent the morning cleaning together, beating dust from curtains, polishing the table Owen's grandfather had started and his father had finished. Caleb had even picked late wildflowers from the hillside, brown-edged and stubborn, arranging them in the blue vase that had been Sarah's favorite. When Rebecca arrived, her arms full of a basket covered with cloth, Caleb ran to meet her at the door. She handed him the basket and he carried it to the kitchen like a treasure. Real biscuits, he announced, lifting the cloth to reveal perfectly golden rounds. Not like Pa's. Or your mother's, Owen added, and all three of them laughed a little watery, but real. They sat down together, the table set for 3. Owen said grace, stumbling over words he hadn't spoken in nearly 2 years. Rebecca's hand found his under the table and squeezed. The meal was imperfect and wonderful. They ate too much and laughed at Owen's terrible gravy. Rebecca told stories about her first year teaching, the mishaps and small victories. Caleb talked about his drawings. The new ones he'd started houses with smoke rising from chimneys. 3 figures standing in the doorway. As they finished, a comfortable silence settled over the table. Owen noticed Caleb looking at the 4th chair, Sarah's chair, still sitting at the table where it had always been. The boy's expression was thoughtful, not pained. Then Caleb rose. He walked to the empty chair, lifted it carefully, and carried it to the corner of the room. He positioned it near the window, facing the table. "What are you doing?" "Son." Caleb turned, and his eyes were clear, peaceful. "Mama can watch from there. She'd want to see us happy, not sit with an empty place where she used to be." Owen's throat tightened. He looked at the chair in its new position, not discarded, not forgotten, honored, a witness instead of an absence. "That's exactly right," he managed. Caleb returned to his seat, but his eyes stayed on Rebecca. Something was working behind his expression, a question taking shape. "Miss Rebecca." "Yes." "Caleb, can you stay? Not just for dinner." He glanced at his father, then back at her. "Forever." Rebecca's breath caught. Owen reached across the table and took her hand in both of his. "Forever," he said quietly. "If she'll have us." The fire crackled in the hearth. Outside, the first snow of winter had begun to fall, soft flakes drifting past the window, dusting the world in white. Inside, warmth pooled in every corner. Rebecca looked at the boy who had lost his mother, at the man who had lost his way, at the home that had been frozen in grief for so long. She looked at the chair in the corner, keeping watch. She looked at the wildflowers in the blue vase, stubborn and beautiful. "I think I'd like that very much," she whispered. Caleb smiled. A real smile, the first one since his mother died. It transformed his face, chased the shadows from his eyes, made him look like the boy he'd been before grief had aged him. Owen pulled Rebecca close on one side and his son on the other. They stood together by the window, watching the snow fall on Cedar Hollow. The empty chair watched with them, holding memory without holding them back. Some families are born into blood and circumstance. Some are built through choice and courage. And some, the strongest ones, are healed into being, forged in loss and redeemed by love. Outside, winter had arrived. But inside the Mercer house, spring had finally begun.